All right, so now we're talking about storage drives. We're going to talk about in this video a few different types of drives and what roles they should play in your editing workflow and which drives you should consider getting. You want something that's going to be fast and reliable and that's going to last a long time. And so I'm going to talk you through some of the pros and cons and different types and what they're used for so that you can make good decisions and make sure that your media workflow is smooth and efficient and working the way that you want it to. There's basically three types of drives that you're going to have in your media workflow as an editor. The first one is a hard drive, second is a solid state drive, and third is a RAID drive. So let's talk about these three. A hard drive is just your standard hard drive that you're used to that comes on any computer. External hard drives are the same. Hard drives are affordable, they don't cost very much, and the speed that you get from them is typically pretty good depending on the one you get. So cheaper ones will typically be a little slower, and more expensive ones will be a little bit faster. It also does depend on the interface that you get. So if you get one with Thunderbolt, it's going to be faster or have a faster overall read and write speed versus if you get one with just regular USB. However, the speed of the interface or the drive that you get doesn't really matter if you're sending files from that drive to another drive that's slower. So your read and write speed may be really high on your hard drive, but if you're sending the files to a drive that is slower than yours, then it's going to take longer in order to send the files because you can only work at the maximum read speed of the drive that you're going to. So all this is to say, don't go out there and spend a ton of money just to get the most expensive hard drive and with Thunderbolt the most expensive interface just for the speed, because most of the time you're probably not going to see those speed gains in real use. Now, the biggest disadvantage of hard drives is that they do have moving parts inside of them. They have a moving disk on the inside that stores all your information. The reason this is a disadvantage is because when there's moving parts, there's more opportunities for the drive to fail, which means that hard drives are more prone to fail more often than the other type of drives that we're going to talk about. So that's something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about SSDs or solid state drives. Solid state drives are extremely fast. They're the fastest drives out there. They can read and write files really fast. So if you're editing off of them, you can play back your footage really fast. If you're transferring files, it'll go really fast. So it will make you a faster editor. It will increase your productivity and your efficiency on set and in post-production. The other nice thing about SSDs is that they don't have any moving parts. They're just flash memory, flash storage, just like a little flash drive. There's nothing moving on the inside, and so they are safer, they are more reliable, and will last a longer time. The downside, of course, to SSDs is that they are relatively expensive, especially compared to hard drives. However, in recent years, the cost of SSDs has really started to come down, and I think over the next few years, you'll really start to see it come down. It's getting to the point where it makes sense, even though it's just a little bit of an increase in price to get an SSD, it still makes sense to get the SSD to have the speed and the reliability that you get from it. And third on our list is a RAID drive. Now, a RAID drive is actually a configuration of two or more drives in one single RAID enclosure. So basically, you can take two hard drives or two solid state drives and put them together in a RAID configuration to get some added benefits from that. There are a bunch of RAID configurations out there that you can get different benefits from, but the most important for filmmakers and for editors are going to be either RAID 0 or RAID 1. The way RAID 0 works is it takes the two drives and combines them together, and it combines the performance and the speed of the two drives, so you end up with a drive that's a lot faster. So for example, if you take a 500 gigabyte drive and another 500 gigabyte drive and you put them together in a RAID 0 configuration, you will get the speed of both drives and the storage space of both drives. So you'll essentially have a 1 terabyte drive, but it can use the power from both of them. And that's because the files are stored not just on one drive or the other drive, but the files are stored actually across the different drives back and forth. And that's what gives you that extra speed boost and gives you the total storage space. Now, a RAID 1 configuration is a little bit different. RAID 1 is what you use when you want the best redundancy or safety or backup of your files. Because what a RAID 1 does is it takes the two drives together in a RAID 1 configuration, and it stores, when you put files on it, it stores them on both of the drives. And so you always have an automatic backup copy of all of your files when you put them onto your hard drive. This means that if one of the drives fails, then you always have a backup copy, and all you have to do is take the copy from the one drive and move it over to the other drive. So ultimately what you get with a RAID drive is the affordability of a hard drive, because you can combine two hard drives together and get extra speed for a faster system or you can combine them together in a RAID 1 configuration and get an automatic backup so that you're not losing your files. So now let's talk about different uses of drives and which type of drive you should use in different scenarios. So the three main types of drives that any filmmaker or editor is probably going to want to have are the following: a travel drive, a working drive, and an archive drive. Your travel drives are going to be the ones that you're taking with you on set. So when you go to shoot at a location and you want to be dumping footage throughout the day or over a few days as you're shooting, you want a drive that you can put files onto very quickly and easily, and then travel with and then bring home to put back into your editing system. Travel drives need to be lightweight. They need to be small. You want to find ones that are sturdy and have good protection. So some of the ones on the market will have maybe bumpers, like rubber bumpers on them, or some sort of enclosure that they're in that helps protect them if you were to drop them. And when it comes to travel drives, I always recommend getting 2 of them at least. So what I do is when I go on set, I take 2 drives with me. At night, when I'm done with the day, I dump all of my footage onto both drives, so I always have a backup copy. And then when I'm traveling, I put 1 drive in my backpack and 1 drive in my luggage. So that way, if I were to lose my luggage or lose my backpack, I wouldn't lose both copies of it. I always make sure that I have a copy, because it'd be the worst thing to go out on set, do a whole 3-day shoot, get the whole thing done, and then come back and lose the footage. When it comes to travel drives, they can be hard drive or SSD. I personally currently am using hard drives for this, but like I said, with SSDs, they are getting cheaper, and I may start transitioning over to solid state drives as those prices come down. Next up is your working drives, and this is going to be the drive that you are using at your desk when you're working on projects. So after you finish shooting, when you come home with your travel drives, you'll take the footage off of your travel drives and put them onto your working drive, which is the drive that you are editing off of. Now, the most important thing with an editing drive is that it's fast. And of course, on top of that, you do want to make sure also that you have plenty of space to store lots of projects. Because if you're like me, you're always working on more than one project at once, you're going to need the extra space in order to store them all on there. It's not like an archive drive where you're storing them forever, where you need tons and tons of space, but it is really good to have a drive that has at least a terabyte or 5 terabytes or 10 terabytes. I'm currently using a 10 terabyte working drive. That's because I'm working on a lot of projects simultaneously, and each of the projects that I do, because I'm shooting on Red or cinema cameras, usually come out to about 500 gigs to a terabyte per project, and so it adds up really fast. As far as the type of drive for a working drive, I highly recommend getting either a solid state drive or a RAID 0 configuration RAID drive. I'm currently using a RAID drive right now, configured in RAID 0, which gives me the extra speed so I can work really, really fast, but it's also relatively affordable compared to a solid state drive, which would be a little bit more expensive. And lastly, you have your archive drive. So once you've brought your footage back home, you've put it onto your working drive, you've finished the project, it's all done, you've delivered it to the client, they're happy, you're all finished. Now is when you're going to move the entire project and all the footage over to an archive drive. Archive drives are designed to hold your footage for a long time. They need to be reliable and long lasting, which is probably one of the biggest things you need to look for in a good archive drive. They don't need to be super fast because you're not editing off of them. You're not transferring files. Once your files are on there, they're just going to stay on there and they're going to sit on there unless you need to access them again in the future. And so your archive drives can be either a hard drive, which is going to be the most affordable, or you can do a RAID drive in a RAID 1 configuration. The nice thing about the RAID 1 configuration is that you get an automatic backup as soon as you store the files on there. So I definitely recommend looking into that. But if you don't use a RAID 1 configuration, you can always look at other backup solutions like cloud backup that will back up your files, or you could just get 2 separate archive drives and just copy your files over to both of them. So there's some of the types of drives that you should look into using and the uses of those drives. Hopefully that's helpful in helping you decide what hardware you should be picking up for your editing station so that you can be working more reliably, more efficiently, and with more productivity.